Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya So this evening I'd like to read from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 2, text 14, if anyone would like to follow. Matra sparshas tu kaunteya shitoshna shukadukada agama payano nityas Tamsitik Shasva Bharata. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. O son of Kunti, this is Krishna speaking to Arjuna. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O scion of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Purport. In the proper discharge of duty, one has to learn to tolerate non-permanent appearances and disappearances of happiness and distress. According to Vedic injunctions, one has to take his bath early in the morning, even during the month of Magha, which is January to February. It is very cold at that time, but in spite of that, a man who abides by the religious principles does not hesitate to take his bath. Similarly, a woman does not hesitate to cook in the kitchen in the months of May and June, the hottest part of the summer season. One has to execute his duty in spite of climatic inconveniences. Similarly, to fight is a religious principle of the Kshatriyas. And although one has to fight with some friend or relative, one should not deviate from his prescribed duty. One has to follow I'll wait. So it's chapter 2, text 14. And I'm almost done at the first paragraph. Thank you so much, Ar. So chapter 2, text 14, and the last sentence in the first paragraph. One has to follow the prescribed rules and regulations of religious principles in order to rise to the platform of knowledge, because by knowledge and devotion only can one liberate himself from the clutches of māyā, or illusion. The two different names of address given to Arjuna are also significant. To address him as Kaunteya signifies his great blood relations from his mother's side, and to address him as Bharata signifies his greatness from his father's side. From both sides, he is supposed to have a great heritage. A great heritage brings responsibility in the manner of proper discharge of duties. Therefore, he cannot avoid fighting. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutaparakamalam Shri Gurun Vaisnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamsha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Priya Vancha Kalpa Tribhischa Kripas Nibi Evacha Patithanam Pavinibhyo Vaishnabhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna, everyone. Good evening. For some reason, every time I come back from India, I always have a very persistent cough. So I don't know if it's the air in India. So please forgive me. So they say there's two types of animals: four-legged animals and two-legged animals. The four-legged animals, we see them all the time: dogs, cats, giraffes. But there's also two-legged animals. Who are those? Chicken? You're too smart. The human being. Srila Prabhupada would often say polished human beings. They say that an animal runs on four legs, but a sophisticated two-legged animal runs on four wheels. So what is the difference between an animal and a human being? Do you want to guess? What makes animals and human beings different? Close. Gorillas can also walk on two legs. The difference is that a human being is known as a rational animal. We have the higher capacity to think of deeper subjects. Unfortunately, animals, they simply just live by their instincts: eating, sleeping, defending, and mating. But a human being can ask higher questions, like, who am I? There are many great scholars, PhDs, scientists, engineers. But when you ask this question, who are you, or what is the goal of life, what happens at the time of death, they draw a blank. So all that learning actually doesn't amount to anything. There's a very nice story Srila Prabhupada tells. Maybe you guys have heard it. There was a very great scholar. He was very intelligent, materially. And he decided to go to India, but he visited during the monsoon season. And during the monsoon season, it rains, it pours. So he happened to see a simple-minded boatman. And he asked him, can you take me across the river? So the boatman said yes. So while he was on the boat, he wanted to show off his intelligence, his learning. So he asked the boatman, do you know what constellation that is, that star? Do you know what star that is? So the boatman said no. The boatman said, I know where to go, left, right, So then the scholar said, you haven't studied astronomy, you wasted 25% of your life. So then they go further, and then they see a fish pop up. And then the scholar says, sir, do you know what name that fish? Do you know the name of that fish? And the boatman says, I'm vegetarian. I don't bother the fish, they don't bother me, we get along. So then the scholar said, oh, you haven't studied microbiology? You wasted 50% of your life. So in this way, he was trying to show off his learning. Then they were right near the shore, so he pointed out a plant and said, do you know what plant that is? And the boatman said, I know broccoli, I know chili, make easy sabji. So he said, I don't know what plant that is. And then the scholar, he said, you haven't studied botany, you wasted 75% of your life. So in this way, he was trying to show off. And then it suddenly started pouring, very, very torrents of rain. And then the boatman said, we have to swim. The shore is just a few meters away. And if we don't, the boat will fill with water and we're going to drown. So the scholar, he said, I don't know how to swim. So the boatman said, oh, it looks like you wasted 100% of your life. So in this way, people study so many subjects and departments in school. But the essence, topics like what is death? What happens at the time of death? How should one prepare for death? They don't study these subject matters. Therefore, their learning is considered to be just useless labor. There's also another example. How old are you, Mataji? 14. In California, if you drive nicely, you get a good driving record. So one day there was a man. He was expert at driving. He knew the rules, regulations, he knew the speed limits. He's never had a mark on his driving record. So he was driving like this, And you could consider him to be the best driver in California. But when you stop this person, you ask him, excuse me, sir, where are you going? And he says, I don't know. So there's a problem there. He's driving and driving, he's following the rules of California nicely, but he doesn't have a destination. So many people are like that. They're so busy, they may be expert, but the essential questions of life, what is the purpose of life? They don't have an answer to this. So Srila Prabhupada, he would describe this as a... How old are you? The boy. 7.5? If he was younger, let's say he was 3 years old, and I give him $100, he doesn't know the value of $100. And I give him, here, I'll give you this small toy for exchange of that paper. He'll do it. So similarly, we're given this human form of life, very, very rare. It's described there are 8,400,000 species of life. And after these different bodies or forms, we finally evolve to the human form of life. But we misuse it. So everyone in this world, they're trying to find happiness, and they're also trying to avoid distress. Isn't it? They're trying to change their circumstances. Only if I get a better job, only if I go to this school. And they're also trying to avoid unhappiness. Prahlad Maharaj and Lord Ramchandra, they say miseries come, unfortunate events come, Disturbances come automatically, unsought. So a wise person, they can conclude if bad things happen for no reason, good things will naturally happen, isn't it? So a wise person, they don't over-endeavor to find happiness. It will naturally come. So this is known as intelligence. And there are two factors governing our happiness and distress. The actions that we perform now and our actions that we did in the previous, even in this life. So this is known as karma, actions and reactions. But unfortunately, in this modern world, people don't believe in karma. They believe in random chance. But this logic of chance, it doesn't make any sense. Within a family, there can be two twins. You know, they have the same parents. But one is born blind and one is born with sight. So why is that? Why is one child born in a good family and then another child born and suffering from the very beginning of their birth? Why is that? Why are there different circumstances in the world? So karma, this is, the word destiny just means the results of our karma. One of our great heroes, Yudhishthira Maharaj, the eldest brother of the Pandavas, he was given a certain question. And the question is, what is the best kind of happiness? He didn't say material happiness. He didn't say bodily strength. He didn't say beauty. He said satisfaction or contentment. Contentment is the best of all kinds of happiness. But in this world, no one is content. No one is satisfied. Socrates, he said contentment is natural wealth and luxury is artificial poverty. But yet, people are chasing this materialistic, luxurious life. Also, another problem is that the modern educational system, they don't teach contentment in schools. They teach you to, Srila Prabhupada, he would say, like a dog. A dog goes from door to door asking for money. So we compare that to job applications. You know, let me apply to this and then maybe you can give me something. So this type of happiness that people are looking for, material happiness, it will never satisfy us, our real self, the soul. Because by nature, the soul is searching for spiritual happiness, not material happiness. Therefore, you see a lot of advertisement. When you're driving down the road, count how many billboards or advertisement there are. And these billboards, what they do is they implant desires within the heart, within the mind. And it's very subliminal. When you're in the store, your mind will naturally be drawn to whatever you saw. And then you're more likely to buy this product. Narada Muni, he cursed these two demigods. Do you remember what their names are? Narada Muni. These two demigods, sons of Kuvera, Manigriva and Nilakuvera. They were sporting in the waters with some young women, and due to intoxication, they were bathing without any clothes on. And when Narada Muni, the saintly Narada Muni, was passing by, the women, they had good sense to cover themselves. But these two sons of Kuvera, they were very shameless. They were too intoxicated. So Narada Muni, he says, wealth blinds a person, who has poverty restores their ability to see. And you can see that. When a person gets wealth, he changes. And similarly, when people get very high positions in life, they forget their roots. Another interesting answer that Yudhishthira Maharaj says, he says, what is an incurable disease for man? And he says, greed, a very strong desire to possess something. It constitutes as an incurable disease. And it's true. Mahatma Gandhi, he said, there's enough for the world's need, but not for the world's greed. So satisfaction is a very wonderful quality to possess. And then this Yaksha, the one that was asking Yudhishthira Maharaj, he asked this very interesting question. He said, who is truly happy in this world? Actually, before this, let me tell this story. There was a room full of very intelligent people, very thoughtful people. And the leader, he asked a question. He said, who is the most unhappy person? So someone said, someone who has disease, they're the most unhappy. Someone says, someone who is in old age, they're unhappy. So in this way, they were offering their answers. Finally, the leader of this group, he said, someone who is envious, he's most unhappy. And when you think about it, it's true. You are not happy to see people advancing more than yourself. So this greed and envy is a disease within the heart, and unfortunately it's very subtle. People may not even know that they become very envious or greedy. So this Yaksha, he asked, who is truly happy in this world? So Yudhishthira Maharaj, he gave several points. He said, one who can cook at home is happy. One who refrains from tamasic food is happy. One who has no debt is happy. One who doesn't come out of their home for livelihood is happy. And then he said, one who is not striving for material things is happy. But this modern civilization is exactly the opposite. One teacher, he said, in Kali Yuga, people don't even know how to cut their own nails. Therefore, they go to salons and they get their nails cut. People don't know how to dress also. So they go to fashion school. So we need to know what are our priorities, what is primary and what is secondary. Money is not necessarily a problem, but it's the desire to acquire money through dishonest means. That's the problem. Sureshwar likes this. In the Bhagavatam, they say that money is sweeter than honey. And people really truly believe this. There was one man, he was running away from a tiger. And there was a dry well. And he happened to slip and fall into this well. And by chance he took hold of a branch, a root. And on the bottom there was a big python snake. And above him, the tiger was waiting for him. And then on this root that he was holding on to, there was a black and white rat, but they were gnawing on it. It's just a matter of time when this branch or this root will fall. And once in a while, honey will drop on his cheek. And then he turns around and he can taste the honey. And then while tasting this honey, he forgets his very dangerous situation. So similarly, in this world, it's very dangerous. Padam padam yadvipadam natesham. Then in this material world, every step is danger. But yet when we acquire some happiness, we forget all about this. Just the other day, I saw a very big accident. I'm sure nobody plans to leave their body. I'm sure nobody plans to get into a horrible accident, but happens do come. And it's described that our position is like water, a drop of water on a lotus leaf. With just the influence of the wind, it can totter and it can fall. And wealth, for most people, it may seem like a good asset, but for a spiritually minded person, it becomes an obstacle in life. It becomes a burden. And why is it a burden? We're always thinking of it. We're always thinking of protecting it. What if I lose my money? How can I maintain my money? Who's going to steal my money? So is that person really peaceful? No. In the Hitopadesh, it says that wealth is very hard to obtain. It's very hard to maintain. So how can someone conclude that money gives or derives any happiness? And it's true. But the question is, what do we do with our wealth? We can use it for our own sense enjoyment, or we can do something with it, like give it to Krishna, who is a possessor of all wealth. What time do we end? Does anyone know? 52? 7. What time do we end, Mataji? 50? 50? 7:15? Okay. Thank you. So Queen Kunti, the mother of the Pandavas, she said there are 4 disqualifications from chanting the holy name nicely. He said one is beauty, the other is wealth, the third is good birth, and the fourth one is material education. So these 4 things are actually the results of pious activities, or the results of good work. The mind has a tendency to be unhappy or satisfied with what it has now. It's always looking for it's always looking for something more. It wants what it doesn't have. I remember my spiritual master, he recently departed from this world, very glorious death. I was in Vrindavan and we cremated his body. And then we threw his ashes in the Ganga. It's interesting because in the West, it's not common to cremate the body. Because maybe they want to numb their mind to thinking what really happens. But they did a traditional cremation. You know, they made a bed out of wood, firewood. And then they put ghee on the body. And then they put more wood. And then they put cow patty. Cow patty is wonderful for fuel. And then we circumambulate with the torch. And then we light the funeral pyre. But yeah, in the West, what they do is that they put them 6 feet under in a coffin, a cemetery. An interesting thing too is in the West, what they do with the body is that they put makeup. They make the body look very beautiful. But what it does is it creates an illusion. We forget that one day we're going to be in this situation. But the mind has a tendency to be dissatisfied. So my spiritual master, he gave this wonderful example. He would travel to Puerto Rico. And before Puerto Rico, he would take the airport, the airline, from flying from New York. So going to the subway, you'll see a big poster of Puerto Rico in New York City. And it says, going crazy in this city, you know, noise, chaos, go to Puerto Rico. tranquil, you know. And then on the picture you'll see the trees, the ocean, the white sand. So then they go to Puerto Rico. And then once they reach Puerto Rico, when they go down the terminals, they'll see another poster as a picture of the New York skyline. This is going nuts on this crazy island with nothing to do. Go to New York City. So then they're being exploited like this. So contentment is actually a very, very nice quality to possess. Because when death comes, it doesn't care about your PhD degree. When death comes, it doesn't care about your bank balance. Actually, what matters is our deeds. Yamaraj, the superintendent of death, he has a secretary. Does anyone know what his name is? I think something like that, Chitragupta. But the secretary, he writes down every deed that we perform. And in the West, they don't know about the 10 directions. They don't know about the 33 devas, the devatas. They don't know about fire, the sun, the moon. These is described that the sun and the moon are the Lord's eyes. So we're always being washed. But in the West, they think they can hide from Krishna. So then they go inside their personal quarters and do so much nonsense. And Chitragupta, he's writing down all of these events, all of these activities. So a devotee, he learns to live a clean life, externally and internally. Mrityu sarva haraschaham. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, death, that's me. I am all devouring death. And I take everything away. In the West, not many people like to talk about the D word, death. And why is that? Because it stops their sense gratification. I was distributing books at Balboa Park, and there was these Japanese businessmen. You can tell they were very well-to-do. So they were kind of laughing at me, you know. Oh, you're a monk, you know, you don't really have anything. You just have these books. So when I asked them, you know, you guys look very, very intelligent. Is it okay if I ask you a question? So they came to my table and asked them, what happens at the time of death? And three of them were they felt uncomfortable hearing this D word. So the youngest out of the four, he stood next to my table and said, what is death? And I told him that you're very, very intelligent, because that's one of the, this is one of the questions that one should ask. What happens at the time of death? Where will I go? Srila Prabhupada uses this example. When we say my hand, my leg, my body, my eyes, we don't say the word I. Because the word my, it implies ownership. This is my table, my books, my cartels, my phone. So we don't say this is I body, we say this is my body. So then who is that I that's thinking my? So that is the soul. And Srila Prabhupada, he says when a dying person is on their deathbed, someone will say, oh no, she's gone or he's gone. But then the body's still there. So what do they mean by she's gone? What do you think, young man? The body is there, but they're saying she's gone. The soul. They can understand that something has left the body. Krishna says that which is pervading the whole body with consciousness, that is the soul. See, this body that we have, it appears to be moving because the soul is in the body. And Srila Prabhupada made a wonderful analogy or an example. as long as the body has a soul, it will float on the water. It feels very light. But as soon as the body leaves, it drowns. So Srila Prabhupada said there's so many departments in these universities, but where is that department that studies the soul? They don't have it. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada, he says that these colleges, they're known as spiritual slaughterhouses. They teach one to be godless. So when we think of the word success, we have a few ideas in our head, you know. If I ask you, little young man, how would you define success? What comes to mind? Huh? Eat healthy? Okay. What else? Getting good grades. What about you? Okay. So we have some type of idea what is success. And a lot of people, they judge you based on what they think is success. A person who is into, I was telling this to my roommates, we see this world through lenses. And whatever we are fascinated by, whatever our interests are, we see the world through these lenses. If a person is very fashion conscious, the first thing he sees is your clothes. They judge you based on the brands that you have. What is your clothes made out of? Silk, cloth, whatever. And if someone is all about cars, the first thing they judge you is what type of car you drive. But what is the purpose of a car? To take you from point A to point B. But most of us, we lose sight of that. And we fall prey into these very, very expensive cars. No matter what car you drive, even if it's a Lamborghini or a Ferrari or this and that, you will still get a flat tire. So similarly, you may have a nice life, but then death comes knocking. You know, when I was a little boy, the first person that I saw dying or dead was my grandfather. He was in the living room and everyone was crying. Everyone was very, very, very troubled by this. And I asked my mom, I said, "What is Grandpa doing?" And my mom, with a very broken, she couldn't even finish her sentence. She said, "Your grandpa's sleeping." I was like, okay, you know. And I was a little boy, maybe your age. And I said, okay, he's sleeping. And I ran outside and I was just playing with my friends and my cousins. And then the next few years I realized, where's Grandpa? You know, like, I haven't seen him, you know. And that's when I realized sleeping, for adults, it means person has moved on, has passed away. So I was really intrigued by this, you know. The next thing you know, that person that we love most, they're no longer here. And we begin to miss their association. My spiritual master, I don't know where he got this reference, maybe some mortician magazine or whatever. But they said within the next 6 months, the people, they forget how we sound like. And without a picture of them, we forget how they look like. So similarly in this world, life is not just about taking up space, but what have we done, what have we contributed to society? What have we done to help others advance in Krishna consciousness? So success for a devotee means one who has developed their love for Krishna. Krishna has many names, unlimited names. And one of his names is Suridam. And Suridam means the best well-wisher. He's actually our best friend. and He reciprocates with us accordingly. If we want to forget Krishna and if we want to be involved in this material energy, then Krishna gives us that facility. But if we want to get to know Krishna, then He gives us the intelligence how to approach Him. So human life is meant for questions. And in this verse, it says one must learn to tolerate without being disturbed. Sometimes when good things happen, we forget about Krishna. And similarly, when bad things happen, we also forget about Krishna. Queen Kunti, she's a very exalted Vaishnavi. Her and her sons, they were put through many difficulties. And I'm sure in this age, when we go through those difficulties, we won't be able to live. They were being hunted like animals. They were Kshatriyas, they were kings. But during their exile, they were hunted by the Kurus. They were looking for them every town, village. They were trying to find the Pandavas. Not only that, but Bhima was poisoned. They were going to be burned in this house of lac, a very flammable substance. Not only that, but they were cheated from their kingdom, from a dice game. You know, Kshatriyas, they cannot refuse a fight, or they cannot refuse a dice game. So Yudhishthira Maharaj, this is Krishna's will, but he could not say no to Duryodhana during the dice game. So they were hunted, they were cheated out of their kingdom. But Queen Kunti, she said, let these calamities happen again and again, because then we'll always be thinking of your lotus feet. And anyone who has attained your lotus feet is freed or liberated from the cycle of birth and death. So we should always remember Krishna favorably, in favorable conditions, and also unfavorable conditions. Because at the time of death, yam yam vapi smaram bhavam tyajit yante kalevaram tam tam ivaiti konteya siddhatat bhava bhavataha. At the time of death, whatever our desire, whatever our attachments, whatever we desire the most, Krishna will fulfill that. So if we want to stay or remain in this material world, Krishna gives us that free will. But if we are intelligent, if we know there's nothing good in this material world, then we will think of Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada has kindly given us this process, a way to always remember Krishna. And in this Kali Yuga, the easiest way is by chanting Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Srila Prabhupada says no one is disqualified. Everyone can chant this mantra. And they said even a dog can participate. Because this vibration is coming from Goloka Vrindavan. It's coming from the spiritual world. And it's in this Kali Yuga, everyone is very, very, what is that verse? Prayeno paisaha sabya kalau asmin yugejana manda sumanda matayo manda bhagya hi badrutaha. In this iron age of Kali, men almost always have but short lives. If a person is 70, 80 years old, he's considered to be a very old man. And we're very lazy when it comes to endeavors, materially and spiritually. We're always disturbed, we're unlucky, and we are also cheated. You know, in India, there's a lot of, in Vrindavan, even in Vrindavan, there's a lot of these professional reciters. They recite the Srimad Bhagavatam. But Srila Prabhupada, he wanted us to read from the first canto all the way to the 12th canto. But these professional speakers, they go straight to the 10th canto. Krishna's pastimes with the gopis. And although they're not qualified to hear this very intimate topic, these rascal reciters, they would recite it. And then they get the wrong idea of who Krishna is, who Srimati Radharani is, who the gopis are. And then they think Krishna to be just like them, a regular person. And that's one of the greatest offenses, to compare Krishna to us. So anyway, it's 8:01. We can chant one round of the Hare Krishna mantra. But before this, thank you for your time and attention. Maybe we can answer a few questions if anyone has one. Sureshwar, you have a question? Was for prasadam? No? Okay. So, I have my beads here. Avik, yes?
About the other people in the world, how do they, like some people do not follow this religion. How would they know?
So Srila Prabhupada, he says, the stringent laws of material nature is very strict. If there's fire and a little baby, ignorant, innocent, if you want to say, if the child touches the flame, will the fire excuse the child? No. It's going to burn the child, regardless of him knowing or not knowing what fire is. So a lot of people in this world, they may not know this. Srila Prabhupada didn't like the word religion, because the word religion, it can change. Because you say you're Christian, you lose faith and then you become Muslim, then you lose faith and then you become Hindu, like that. But what this is known as Sanatan Dharma. It's an eternal practice. So one easy way is giving them a book. See, people may not be ready to hear, you know. So you can also just have a conversation with them. But even if they're not open to that, you can give them, like here on Thursdays we have the Krishna Lounge. This is where we invite those that we meet on college campuses, Balboa Park, Seaport Village, La Jolla Cove. There's about 3 brahmacharis that go out and distribute books, and we invite them to come. So they may not be ready for philosophy, so we get them to chant the Hare Krishna mantra. And if they keep their mouth closed, you know, they don't want to chant, then we have prasadam for them. But just by hearing the name is so powerful. It penetrates through all these different layers. Because the Hare Krishna mantra, it's on a different level, it's on a spiritual platform. But whether they believe it or not, Srila Prabhupada was once asked a question. He said, they asked him, what if you die and then you find out that this practice was bogus, you know? Srila Prabhupada said, at least we lived a nice life. We lived a pure life. You know, we didn't harm any animal just to satisfy the tongue. We tried getting people to become God conscious. We lived a nice life with no regrets also. A lot of people with desires, they have so many regrets in life. I should have done this, I should have done that. And then Srila Prabhupada asked this reporter, may I ask you a question? He said, what if you're wrong? What if at the time of death, everything that you have done is recorded? Not only that, but you have to face these consequences. So we don't. So whether they understand Krishna consciousness or not, we actually have a duty to try. You know, but those that are envious, those with atheistic tendencies, we avoid them. But the innocent, those that are curious, we try to get to we try to give them a book or invite them to the temple. Did that answer your question? Kind of? Okay. Yeah. It's interesting because when I came to find out about Krishna consciousness, I was so attracted by it. Because I grew up here in the West, you know, and in the West there's nothing. It's nothing. It's a very degraded lifestyle, you know. And in Vedic times, people were very noble. They knew what virtue was. They knew what morality was. They knew what duty was. Now in this age, people spend so many hours playing video games. Such a waste of time. There was a dying man, and he asked the doctor, "Can you extend my life for 1 more year?" And the doctor said, "With billions of gold coins, you cannot buy 1 moment of time." But yet people are doing what with their time? So many nonsense. So I try to use my time wisely by either chanting, by reading, by learning more about going deeper into my Krishna consciousness. And don't follow the fools and follow the fools and rascals out there. They don't know what is to be done and what is not to be done. In the Bhagavad Gita, it's described that in this age, people mistake irreligion to be religion. And they mistake religion to be irreligion. When I distribute books, people come to me, they tell me what you're teaching is demoniac. Yeah, these people are stuffing their face with dead animals. They're drinking themselves to death. You know. And they're very, anyway. But when we tell them, you know, please chant Hare Krishna, they don't want to. You know that story, Sureshwar? It was a newspaper. And I forget the story or the side. I think the wife was telling the man, chant, chant, chant. And then the man, what did he say, Sureshwar? Cat, cat, cat. But everyone has free will. Yeah. Chant, chant, chant. And then the man said, cat, cat, cat. So even if you give a person you know, the process, they still have free will. You know, and the soul doesn't die with the end of the body, but it can prolong their stay in the material world. But for devotees, we want to try to bring back as many as we can before we leave this world. Our mood is not self-liberation or just selfish liberation just for ourselves. Prahlad Maharaj, he says, I have nothing to fear. But I do, I worry about the fools and rascals that are in this material world. I want to help deliver them. So that should be our mood. Okay. Would you like to chant 1 round? Or do you want to take prasadam? Chant? Vic Prabhu, do you guys have beads? Or? Okay.